Hello and welcome to this podcast for cell biology. In this podcast, we're just going to talk about two big areas here. The first one will be to compare acids and bases, and also to talk about how they relate to pH. And then we'll talk about functional groups, the 7 functional groups that we're going to interact with to some extent throughout this semester. Let's go ahead and get started talking about acids and bases. Your book goes into quite a bit of detail talking about acids and bases, but all you need to know is what I'll explain here. And in explaining acids and bases, I want to talk about the pH scale. We know that the pH scale goes from 1 to 14. Let's indicate the middle here with a 7. Anything between, say, 7.1 to 14 is known as a base. We could define bases as molecules that acquire protons during a chemical reaction. You could also think of them as giving up an electron during the chemical reaction. A basic molecule will be in that pH range of 7.1 to 14. Now I want to talk about acids. Acids give up protons during a chemical reaction. You could also think of them as accepting an electron. And acids are going to fall in that range of 1 to 6.9. This area around 7 is considered a neutral pH. So let's consider a typical human cell. It will have a pH of about 6.8 to 7.4. There is some variability here. And if we go beyond humans, there are some microbes and other organisms that thrive in much lower acidic pHs in this 1 to 3 range, and also some that can survive in a much higher range. But for this example, let's just talk about a human cell which has a pH between 6.8 to 7.4. This cell, through metabolism and environmental exposures, will have fluctuations where acidic concentrations will go up and go down at various times, as well as bases will go up and go down. However, as acids increases or decreases within the cell, the pH still stays within this normal range of 6.8 to 7.4. How does it do that? It does that by using substances called buffers. Buffers minimize the impact of acids and bases. They allow this pH to remain within any given cell's normal range. Buffers play a big role in maintaining something we call homeostasis. We can think of homeostasis as the set of physical and chemical conditions that maintain a stable cellular environment. Maintains the pH, the temperature, and other parameters to maintain that relative stability for the cell. And this is largely enforced using various kinds of buffers. All right, the last thing I want to talk about for this podcast are functional groups. To begin this brief discussion of functional groups, we need to first talk about carbons. With few exceptions, like water, most cellular molecules contain carbon. We call these molecules organic compounds. Anything that contains carbon we call organic. Biologically speaking, carbon is extremely important. One of the reasons it's important and unique to carbon and not other atoms is due to its versatility. And by versatility, what I'm talking about is that carbon has 4 valence electrons. So if we were to draw the carbon atom here on its outer shell, it has 4 unpaired electrons. It still has the 2 in the middle here, in the inner shell, but it has these 4 unpaired electrons. Because of that, it can form 4 covalent bonds with other molecules. This is unique to carbon, and is one of the reasons it is so abundant in biological systems. Carbons can form long chains of interconnecting carbons, often with hydrogens attached to them, but they can also have various functional groups attached to them. These functional groups is what allows these carbon structures, these carbon-based structures, to have very specific functions and to be utilized within the cell within very specific pathways. I want to talk to you about 7 specific functional groups that we'll come back to at various times throughout the semester. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with these 7 functional groups. The first is the amino group. And the amino group, when it's attached to a carbon, will look something like this, with a nitrogen and up to 2 hydrogens on it, and it's attached to the carbon chain. And what we often do here is we just call that R. This just means there's some series of carbons attached to this end here. The next one we should know is carboxyl. Carboxyls also have that R group, the carbon chain here. Then it has a carbon, a double bond with an oxygen, and then an OH. The next one, carbonyl. It's easy to get these two mixed up because they're spelled very similarly and they look similarly. We can draw a carbonyl like so, with the carbon in the middle and the rest of the side chain coming off the side here. It will also have a double bond with an oxygen attached to it, but instead of a hydroxyl group, it will just have a hydrogen. The next one is called hydroxyl, and this one just has an OH, the hydroxyl group. The next one is called phosphate, and off of the carbon, the phosphate group will appear as so, with 4 oxygens and 2 of them with negative charges on it as so. The sixth one, sulfhydryl, and this one just has an SH. The last one is called methyl. For some reason this one's not included in your book, but it's a very important one, so I'm going to include it for you here. So off of the carbon we have a carbon with 3 hydrogens. So let's talk about these real quick, and I'll try to help give you some hints on how to memorize these. But as you look at these, this amino group, it's unique because it's the only one that has a nitrogen in it. So if you see any functional groups on a quiz or test with a nitrogen in it, you know it's an amino group. Also, to help you remember it, amino has an N in it, and none of the other groups have the letter N. Let's jump down here to hydroxyl. The hydroxyl group is an OH, and OX is in the word hydroxyl. This should help you remember the difference between carboxyl and carbonyl. Within the functional group of a hydroxyl, there is a hydroxyl group indicated as well. So again, it has the OX and it has a hydroxyl group. Carbonyl, the functional group, is right here, and I don't have a special way to remember it except for once you know what a hydroxyl group is, the other one that looks like the carboxyl is carbonyl. Phosphate. The word phosphate has a P in it. None of the other functional groups have a P in it, and it is the only one that contains, of these shown here, that contains phosphorus in it. Sulfhydryl. It is the only one with sulfur in it. And our last one is methyl. It contains this methyl group. I don't have a good way to remember that, except for it's the only one that's left. So if you can remember the first 6, this will be the one that's left. On a quiz or exam, I'm not going to have you draw these out, so you won't have to draw them out. You will have to identify them. I may give you a molecule with one of these on it, and I may ask, what is the molecule, or what is the functional group that you see on this molecule? I may also give you a larger molecule that has multiple functional groups. Though I didn't draw it here, any given carbon-based molecule can have multiple functional groups on it. So I may say which functional groups are seen in this molecule. So I would be able to recognize the functional group and know the name of that functional group. Again, you won't have to draw them out on a quiz or an exam. Okay, that ends this podcast. So let's provide a real quick summary here. If you remember, we began by talking about acids and bases. So that acids were in the pH range of 1 to 6.9, and bases were from about 7.1 to 14. But within many cells, like human cells, the pH is held at about a value of 7. And the way that it maintains this pH, even though there's acids and bases present, is that there are various buffers involved to keep our cellular pH at this nice homeostatic pH of 7. We then talked about the 7 functional groups. We talked about their structures, what they were called, and if you remember, I said you don't need to memorize the structures in the sense that you're going to have to write them down later, but you do need to be able to recognize them. If you see them, you should be able to tell me what they are. All right, if you have any questions at all, please make sure you come see me. If not, I'll see you in class. Bye.